take me back even before the NFL. I'd love to know, what is the college recruiting process like in the late 1980s when Clemson recruiting, I'm sure other schools as well. I'm sure it's a lot different than today. I just love to know what that process was like for you.
Very much so. Honestly, when I got recruited, I was more discovered than recruited.
Okay.
When I was in high school at Lamar High back in Lamar, South Carolina, my coach came up to me. We were playing a playoff game in Lamar, and he tells me that there's some recruits out here, but they're not out here to see you.
Mm.
And that kind of gave me a clue, like, you need to turn it on tonight. And I had a really good game. And that game actually got me recruited. Because you got to think, there was no internet, there was no recruiting services back at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times, guys that played at a small high school, like my high school, was basically discovered, and I was discovered.
How late in the process was that? Did that happen senior year for you, or when did that game occur?
It happened my junior year.
Okay, gotcha. What other schools recruited you besides Clemson, and why did you ultimately choose Clemson?
Well, schools like the University of South Carolina, actually, the University of South Carolina was the first to give me a letter. And then I got offers from Appalachian State and South Carolina State.
Okay.
And Appalachian and South Carolina State didn't give me an offer until I committed to Clemson. But the reason why I committed to Clemson was because, I just like the atmosphere at the time. The program was a really good program in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And it had more of a small town feel that I liked. I was comfortable in that environment than maybe going to a University of South Carolina, which is in the middle of Columbia, South Carolina, which is for someone who came in the environment, smaller town. Clemson actually felt better to me.
Okay, that makes sense. To kind of fast forward, when you're coming out of the draft, did you get a sense that Pittsburgh had interest in you pre-draft? Did you get that feeling?
Yeah, I did. I had an interview with all the coaches and all the scouts at the combine. And then they also flew me out there to come see them before the draft.
Okay.
So I had a feeling that, man, this may be the place.
Gotcha.
You're never sure, but I felt like Pittsburgh may be the place for me to be. And I met Coach Cowher, and I wanted to play for Coach Cowher.
What does a pre-draft visit look like? I know that can mean something different to each team. Are you getting on the board? Is it just meeting your coaches? Like, what is the visit? How does that work?
Yeah, you kind of meet the coaches, and also you meet the trainers again. They kind of evaluate you the same way they did at the combines. And I just kind of had a talk with Bill Cowher, and had dinner later. And so they just, I guess when you're high on their board or one of their players, they kind of bring you in,
right,
and see what you're all about, see if you're real or not.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's
Right.
interesting because your first year was Coach Cowher's first year, correct?
Yes.
And I'm just curious. I know you have no comparison necessarily to Chuck Noll not playing for him, but what was that first year like under Cowher? Did it have the feel of this is a guy that's new to the job, or a guy that felt like he was in control of the team immediately?
No, I felt like he was in control of the team, but I'm a young guy.
Right.
But how the team kind of responded to him, it seemed like he was very much in control. And I like the fact that he was still excited when he made a play. He was out there meeting you midfield, giving you a hug,
Right.
giving you a high five. He was still young enough to relate to the players. So I felt like he was definitely a guy that was in control.
Did you ever catch the Cowher chin when he get pissed off at you and give you that look and you're like,
yeah.
Yeah.
As a linebacker, a lot of times you had to go to the sideline and, we call a timeout or something like that, or the opposing team call a timeout.
Hmm.
and you got an opportunity to experience the chin. But I have to say this about Coach Kyle was I thought that he treated players pretty well. He didn't
Hmm.
really just get on you as a player. Not that, I didn't really experience that from him.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
But I was the kind of player that was probably pretty hard on myself anyway. So you didn't really have to do that for me.
Right.
But he didn't really seem to get on players that badly.
Was it hard your rookie year to sit and wait your turn? I imagine that's a big transition. You're a star, high school, college starter, and then you're sitting. I know had some great players in front of you, but is it hard to sit that first year?
I was naive when I first got in. I thought that, like in college, you did a lot of rotation.
Hmm.
And in college, we rotated a lot. So I thought it was the same in the NFL, that you're going to rotate, that you're going to get, if you wasn't a starter, you'd get some playing time.
Yeah.
And I quickly realized if you're not a starter, you're not getting any playing time. You're not getting any playing time on defense. The
Hmm.
starters are going to stay out there for the majority of the time. And that's when I was like, okay, I got to be able to go out there and play. So I was okay because it was really my first year playing inside linebacker. I never played it until I got to the NFL. So for me, it was a little different. You know, it was it was I was okay with being developed. I was okay
Right.
getting behind the scenes, understanding and learning the position a little bit more. It wasn't like I was just chomping at the bit, but I know like the next year I was going to play. I wanted to play.
Right. Right. And you did. It's funny you mentioned that. I was going to ask. I know. I'm sure you get asked every time someone talks to you, but about the size, just for being that big of
Hmm.
a linebacker.
Yeah.
Were you that in high school too? Like, what did you kind of become in that off ball
No,
position, and even just playing linebacker on the edge in general?
no. I was actually when I came into Clemson, I was undersized.
Okay.
I was about 195
Really?
and about 6 foot,
Get out.
and then I grew. I grew like another 2 inches.
Okay.
And when I left college, I was around 240. And what happened was back. You got to understand, back in that time, the game was more so in the box.
Hmm.
There was a lot more running at the time. And the position that I played, we had to take on fullbacks, linemen, and I was a guy that was able to have some weight on me, but also be able to maintain their speed and quickness.
Right.
And that was me. I was able to maintain the speed and the quickness, although I got heavier. But it was a gradual thing. It wasn't like I was 300 pounds my first or
Sure.
second year or anything like that. I just kind of grew into it.
Did you get heavier intentionally? Did a coach want you heavier? I imagine some coaches along the way
I
said,
didn't.
"Let's
I
lose
didn't
weight."
really. No, I didn't really get it. I didn't really get heavy intentionally. But what
Yeah.
happened was I was still so good at that weight,
Hmm.
especially around the 270, 280. I was probably no different than any linebacker that was weighing 230. I
Right.
could run. I can cover tight ends down the field. So it wasn't that much of a difference, comparatively speaking to other
Sure.
linebackers. I still made, you know,
All the
average about
plays. Yeah.
100 tackles a game. Uh, in a regular season, I got like 11 interceptions. So I can do everything any other linebacker could do. I was
Right.
just a little bit heavier.
Yeah. No, I think that's the interesting thing because, yeah, I mean, you could move. I mean, there was one clip you running down the seam with a tight end or something and breaking up the
Mhm.
pass. I mean, it was really remarkable. Did you know that Pittsburgh was going to shift you to that off ball linebacker role, or did you find that out once you got actually after drafted and you became a Steeler officially?
No, I kind of knew that that was going to be the role for me. When I went to the
Okay.
Senior Bowl um, in college, Coach Art Shell switched me from outside backer to inside backer, and I had no clue what I was doing. And I thought, like, man, um, I don't know this position. at all. But I also told myself, just go to the ball.
Yeah.
Just run to the ball. If anything, just go to the ball. And I did. It wasn't really a natural position for me
Hmm.
at
Yeah.
all. I didn't come in knowing the position. It took me a little time to really get it down. And although I
Sure.
started my second year, it was really probably more so because I was very athletic and could move. But as far as getting the reads down and everything like that, it took me a while.
Sure. I can understand. Just one last question. You said you were 270, 280 for the bulk of your career. Is that kind of where you were generally around weight wise?
Right.
Okay. Gotcha. What was the key to the success of those great mid 90s Steelers defenses? I know there was so much great talent, yourself included, but what was the overall key for you guys just to be so consistently good?
I think one of the things was you always need good coaching. So I think from the top down, we're really good as far as Coach Coward, Don Capers, Dick LeBeau, Marvin Lewis, Don Mitchell, guys like Mike Archer, Tim Lewis. We just had a really good coaching staff, and
Okay.
they put us in great position. I think also what made us good was our defense was kind of we were innovative in a lot of ways. The way we blitzed, the way we approached the blitz zones instead of like blitzing one on one. We kind of did it where we never really put the cornerbacks or safeties in harm's way. And then we had the pieces, the right pieces.
Hmm.
And a lot of times the person that doesn't get talked about a lot is Joel Steve,
The
that
nose
guy in the
tackle,
middle,
right? Yeah.
the nose guard. And then with the four linebackers we had guys like Kevin Green, Greg Lloyd, Chad Brown, myself, guys like Jason Gilden, Earl Holmes, Terry Oslowski. And the thing was, we all were different, but we fit the position well.
Hmm.
Um, Kevin was a guy who could consistently rush the passer really well. Greg could really rush the passer very well too, but Greg could really make some explosive big plays. Chad Brown was a good cleanup guy who was an exceptional pass rusher, but he was doing it from the inside position. And I was more so of the grinder kind of enforcer, dirty guy
Hmm.
who could run down the field with tight ends, but also be able to tackle in space. Was really good as far as taking on guards and playing in the trash, as I call it.
Right.
So the combination of being an innovative defense and also having the right players in play was great. And then we took ownership as players as well
Hmm.
because of the legacy. It's kind of funny. We knew the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you kind of take that legacy very seriously.
Sure.
You want to be a part of, especially a linebacker, you want to be one of the better linebackers
Hmm.
in that organization. And I really felt like those early 90 teams, the mid 90 teams really took the legacy from the 70 team and we kind of carried on that tradition.
Yeah. No, I would 100% agree. I know he wasn't your position coach, but we talked to Coach LeBeau earlier in the offseason. You have any good memories or any good stories of Coach LeBeau?
Oh, we got plenty. I mean, Coach LeBeau was a guy that you just kind of, you're a LeBeau soldier, that's what we call ourselves. The one thing I liked about, well, he did the Christmas Carol
Right. Night before
story
Christmas, right?
around Christmas, night before Christmas. And you have these men who are in their 20s, 30s, and we're listening like we're 5-year-olds. He does such a good job. He's such a charismatic kind of coach. And he was also a coach who played in the league,
Hmm.
so he understood the players. And one of the things I liked about Coach LeBeau was he treated you like a man. And back then, you had coaches that would kind of yell at their players, kind of old school military type of deal. He wasn't like that. He knew how to talk to you. But more importantly, I thought he was a really great teacher.
Mm.
And I think what makes a really good coach is a guy who can articulate the scheme and really can coach you to become a better player. And I thought that that's what he did very well. And the defense is we really believed in him. And so it showed up on the field.
Hmm.
And that's the way we play because we believed in him. We had pride as far as the team is concerned. I think we took ownership for our play. And you had to take, like also you were accountable too. You had to be accountable.
Sure.
You had guys like Greg Lloyd and Rod Wilson that, if you didn't play up to their standards, then you couldn't play on the field.
Right.
And that says something when if you're a player and that player likes you, especially one of the top players, Hall of Fame players, and those guys want you to be on the field with them, that says a whole lot.
Yeah, I think it's the culture that was created by the coaches and the players. I think that's a really good point. What
Right.
was your favorite memory in Pittsburgh? If there was one particular game or moment or whatever it was that really sticks out above the rest.
Oh, wow. I would have to say I like the Monday night experience in Pittsburgh at that time. I don't know what our record was, but we were pretty good. I think we lost maybe 1 or 2 games on Monday night.
Hmm.
But the atmosphere on Monday night in Pittsburgh was phenomenal. And now you got to think there was no Thursday night games. Rarely were there Sunday night games. So you had the schedule of the Sunday games, 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock, and that was about it. And then you had the Monday night game, which was the game of the week.
Right.
And when you got an opportunity to play on Monday night, you understood that everybody was watching. And so during that Cowher era, man, we really showed up on Monday night. We really did. It was a lot of fun. So to me, that was one of my best experiences. Of course, playing in the Super Bowl
Sure.
was an amazing experience too. But really, gosh, man, that was a great atmosphere. I just love playing in Pittsburgh because the fans really understood the game. They were knowledgeable fans. They were behind us. It was a culture. It was something that, from the 70s on, people grew up being Pittsburgh Steelers fans. They
Right.
probably had a onesie that had Steelers on it, or a football, or a terrible towel.
Right.
So they really took the game seriously and they bought into the culture because the culture was Pittsburgh as well.
Yeah. No, I think and I think a lot of that still holds true today.
Yes.
I know it's a bit of a difficult question to ask. You referenced playing in the Super Bowl against Dallas. I know what the Super Bowl winners do when the game's over. For you guys coming out on the wrong end of that, what do you do after the Super Bowl? I mean, you're back in the locker room. What do you do that night? Can you take me through what that night is like?
Yeah, it was difficult because we felt like the season we had 3-4, and to be able to make it, we started off 3-4, and then was able to run off about 8 straight games and be in the playoffs. How we won in the AFC Championship prior to the year before we lost, we were 3 yards short. To make it there and to give Dallas I thought we gave them a really good game.
Hmm.
We made a couple mistakes, but we still should have won the game. We played well enough to win, but you can't have turnovers.
Right.
It's kind of a sad. It's definitely a sad moment because
Sure.
you have an opportunity to be the number one team in the land and the number one sport.
Hmm.
And when you're the Super Bowl champions, you live forever. That history lasts. When you're the losing team, you're kind of a footnote.
Yeah.
Nobody really. We could almost say who won what Super Bowl, but we could, if you say what was the team they played,
Yeah, you wouldn't know half of most of them. Yeah.
you really never remember unless you are a Pittsburgh Steelers fan and you were in that Super Bowl. So,
Right.
it was really sad. You congratulate each other for a great season, but the opportunity was missed. We still had a gathering for the team and the families, but it's a sad moment.
Right.
And then the next day, I mean, that's all you see is coverage of the Super Bowl
Hmm.
and the highlights of the Super Bowl. I mean, it's
Yeah.
all day. I mean, it's almost the whole week, and it's just it's a tough moment. It
Yeah.
really is, especially when you knew you were close and you
Right.
had an opportunity to win.
For sure. But that night you were together as a team in some aspect. It wasn't everybody kind
Yeah,
of
we were
going their own
together
way.
as a team. We were
Yeah.
together as a team. You kind of, you had a dinner and whatnot, and it was. I mean, it wasn't really a great gathering where you just like remembered and you stayed
Sure.
up all night. You stayed up all night, but it was just like, man, it's a tough one.
Yeah. You're just wide awake, replaying, I'm
Yeah,
sure, everything.
replaying it, like, what could you done?
Hmm.
What could you done better? And for me, it was bittersweet because it was probably a coming out game for myself, where the whole nation got to really see me play well.
Hmm. You had a sack in that game, I think,
Had
right?
a sack in that game, had about 10 tackles. Played pretty well. There were some things
Hmm.
I could have done better, but for the most part, it was a game that people recognized my play a little bit more
Hmm.
than they did before. So
Do you still think about that loss, or have you kind of made peace that
I
it
know I
happened?
think about that loss all the time.
Yeah.
Because and then sometimes I even say like, man, I even replay it to like like we won. Sometimes I pretend that we won, but
Okay.
I can never watch it the whole way
Yeah.
because because the end results, and it was tough. It really was, and so it's something that you never forget.
Hmm.
You never forget playing in the Super Bowl, and I'm sure if you won it, it was probably incredible, and you wonder what that feeling would have been like to
Sure.
just to win that game.
Sure.
It would
One
have
last
been, yeah. Mhm.
I was gonna say one last question about that season. That was Rod Woodson tears the ACL week
Mhm.
one. Cowher keeps a spot open. Can you did you remember Woodson? He was, I assume, optimistic he was going to come back. Was he around like, hey guys, I'm coming back, get ready? Did you could you see that, or was he kind of off to the side because he was hurt?
No, you could tell that he was getting ready, but it wasn't like I'm gonna come back.
Hmm.
But you saw him all the time, and he's like, okay, Rod is around, and he really kept up with the team. It wasn't like he just kind of went off on his own and did his own training. He stayed with the team, and the next thing you know, Super Bowl, he was dressed out, ready to play.
Okay.
And I was
Nice.
like, wow, because back then having that injury was basically season over with. You're not
Yeah.
playing again. But he was able to come back and he actually played pretty well.
Right. Yeah. It's incredible because usually that back then it's like full year. You're out, and then you come back the
That's full
next
year,
year.
yeah.
Yeah.
There was no medical miracles back then.
Yeah, wild, wild. To kind of take it towards the end of your career, I had read an article, something about that you were surprised about getting released by Pittsburgh after 2000. Were you
Right.
surprised, and how did you find out that they were going to release you?
Well, actually, I got a phone call from Ed Bouchette that told me that they were thinking about getting rid of me or thinking about waiving me. And that's fine in a lot of ways. I would, I didn't take the news that great.
Hmm.
I just thought that being there for 9 years or so, and this is it's their organization, so they didn't have to let me know. I thought that I build up enough equity where they would have just said, "Hey, Kirk, this is what we're thinking about doing."
Right.
And I understood the business side of it, but back then you were just really loyal. I mean, football teaches about being loyal. We're a family, and on that level, it's not really so.
Yeah.
It's just okay. We're gonna keep you as long as you provide a very good service for us.
Hmm.
But once we feel like you're not that type of player, we will get rid of you. And I think in a lot of ways, some people look at it from the outside as, oh, it's just business. But for the person that is getting done to is very personal.
Absolutely. And
It's
especially,
extremely personal because you have invested so much time into it. And like I said, back then, you thought you're gonna play with a team forever. I thought I would be with the Pittsburgh Steelers because I've been with them for 9 seasons. So
sure,
why wouldn't I?
sure.
And actually, I had a really good season that last year. And so you think, and my weight had went down, I lost weight that year. I was really coming back to playing like I played in those Pro Bowl years.
Hmm.
And so, and I knew that the next year we're going to be really good. And I even told the team like, let's get prepared because next year we're going to make a run.
Yeah. And
And
they
sure
did. They
enough,
went to the title game that year, right? No
went to
one.
the
Yeah.
title game.
Right.
I just wasn't a part of it.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's not a good feeling anytime you lose your job. It's not a good feeling because you kind of wonder what you could have done better. And especially someone like me that was very hard on themselves, wondering what could I have done better,
Hmm. Right.
Was it the weight? But I still played well. I still played at a really
Right.
good level, but it was a money issue. And, you know, the only thing that I had a problem with was, I just thought that I did enough where they could have called me up and say, "Hey, Kurt, this is what we're thinking about doing."
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I didn't
Because
get that. I had to hear that from
a reporter.
an outside party, a third party,
Yeah.
and that's never good. And he
Right.
couldn't wait to tell me.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was trying to get that story, so he couldn't wait to tell me. But
Yeah.
I think that when I have an organization that you hope that you have to do what you have to do, I understand, but I thought that I was an employee that was worthy of saying, "Hey, this is what we're thinking about doing."
Yeah. I think it's a really good point about the loyalty. They're loyal until they're not. They're loyal until that last second and they say, all right, we're done
Yeah.
here. And the loyalty goes away.
It really is. I mean, and the funny thing is, football's kind of built on that loyalty because when you're in middle school, junior varsity is that way.
Yep.
It was that way in college, but college is really pro ball now with
Mm.
the NIL, the transfer portal, which is basically
Free
free
agency.
agency
Yep.
for players. So I don't know if you can preach those values anymore to players unless you're going for the national championship.
Hmm.
The other teams that are not going to be in the national championship, it's business now.
Yeah.
Guys are going to be leaving. Now you have a turnover rate that was way higher than it was just a few years ago.
Hmm.
So, they preach the loyalty and the fans are loyal and you think it's family. We're wearing the same colors. But at the end of the day, it is a business for the players and for the coaches and for the organization. So when a player acts like a businessman, you can't blame him anymore.
Sure. That's the way it's
They
built.
got to do what's best for their business
Yeah.
because everybody else around them is doing the same thing, which
Yeah.
is all fair. It's all fair.
And careers are short and you got to maximize when you can
Yeah.
maximize. Yeah.
So, but the good hope fan doesn't look at it that way,
Hmm.
and I have to appreciate the Pittsburgh Steelers for even acknowledging you as a Pittsburgh Steeler. But nowadays, I don't know how many times they're going to have those alumni dinners or whatever, because, unless it's your superstar player or your quarterback, that's going to be able to stay for a long period of time.
Hmm. Do you still follow the Steelers? Are you still somewhat involved in that inner circle?
I follow the Steelers and I always want them to win, but I'm not devastated if they lose.
Okay. Fair.
But I look at it, I still like looking at really honestly, I watch the red zone if I'm watching NFL
Hmm.
because they have all the teams, all the action. You get in the red zone. To me, that's the best way to watch the NFL now.
Yeah.
I unless it's the playoffs, it's hard for me to just watch one team or watch two teams play a game.
Sure.
But I like the red zone because I get to watch all the teams at one setting.
Hmm.
So yes, I always follow the Pittsburgh Steelers. I always want the Pittsburgh Steelers to do well, but it's not like not from a fan standpoint,
Hmm.
if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I get you. You're not losing sleep if they lose
I'm
a
not
game.
losing sleep
Yeah.
now. With the Clemson Tigers, it's different.
Different story.
It's a
How do
different
they how do
story.
they look this year? How does Dabo how's the quarterback situation? I haven't followed it super closely.
I have yet to know. I don't know.
Okay.
And I do a podcast about the team,
Hmm.
and I think that is the question: what
Yeah.
is the quarterback situation, and how they're going to adapt to the new coordinator that they have?
Okay. Gotcha.
And I always say you never know until you watch them play.
Yeah,
Like you can
that's
say
fair.
whatever in the preseason, you can put whatever spin, and that's what coaches are supposed to do
Hmm.
because you want your fan base to be excited and ready to go. But let's be honest, you don't know until they start playing game
Yeah.
one.
It all looks good on paper, and then you got
It
to
all
see it
looks
in
good on
action.
paper,
Yeah.
and hey, this guy's a 4-star recruit, blah blah blah. But nowadays, if the kid is not happy and they're not playing,
He's
you
leaving.
know, you may not even develop the kid.
Hmm.
So college football is different, and I know coaches complain about it, but it's something they got to adapt to too because a coach can leave and it'll be all good. So why can't players?
Right. There was, and I forget his name. He was in Steelers camp this year. The quarterback from Clemson. He was a big time recruit. Didn't work. Went to Northwestern and then came back to Clemson. I forget. I don't know if you know his name.
I know
Um,
exactly who you're talking about.
yeah,
Oh
I
man,
forget.
what is the kid's name? He saved
Hunter Johnson, was that it? Hunter Johnson?
Hunter. I think it was. I think it might have
Hunter.
been Hunter or somebody like that. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, it was just crazy to see him leave and then come back, and it's just
yeah.
a interesting dynamic. Just a couple more questions for you, Levon, and thank you so much for your time. Are
No problem.
you, when you watch the NFL today, are you discouraged by this world of it's all about points, NFL is all about scoring, the fantasy football, the gambling aspect? Does that discourage you, or do you just say that's just the evolution of how the game's
I
going to go?
It doesn't discourage me. I just think it's the evolution of the game.
Okay.
I think that everything changes every 5 years or so,
Hmm.
and that's just the world. So the NFL is no different from that. It is a little bit more emphasis on the offensive side of the ball. As a defender, and as a defensive coach, I think it's tougher. It's a challenge to be a consistent, really good team.
Yeah.
I think if I was a defensive coordinator or a defensive coach or a defensive player, I'll be a little frustrated with the NFL
Right.
because it's not it's not in your favor.
What
It
what
really
about
is.
what about the position? Because even though you were the one of the bigger inside linebackers, those linebackers in the 90s were still big. Like Lloyd was big, Green was
Yeah.
big, Holmes was big. Today you got 215-pound safeties. They moved down to linebacker. Do you look at that and say, like, how is that even a position? How do you play inside linebacker at 215? Or do you just again say that's the evolution of the game?
I think it's an evolution of the game, but I think you have to be careful. That guy has got to be a true hybrid.
Yeah.
I think you can't just put any safety and say, well, you're 215, play linebacker because linebacker, you're talking about the reads, it being a cerebral position. And so you just got to get guys who can play the run and play the pass. You
Yeah.
can't just say, well, we're going to substitute a guy because he's a better skilled guy as far as covering. But if I'm a coach and I see that you brought a safety in to play linebacker, I'm just going to test that guy in the run game
Hmm.
all game long.
Yeah.
Because trust me, if you can't play the run, I don't care what era it is tough. Playing a
Right.
run is, if you can't stop the run, it is physically demoralizing. And so I don't think you can just simply put a guy that was a safety and say, hey, why don't you play linebacker? I think
Yeah.
it's got to be a guy that has the combination of both, that who can play the run still, who can really play the run, but also be able to be effective in the passing game.
Yeah. And you're right. You're seeing a lot of those hybrid guys struggle in the NFL today because they
Yeah,
can't play
because
the run. And in Pittsburgh, especially, you better play the run. Like in December, you got to play the run.
well, you're playing a 3-4, you got to play the run because you got those guards coming after you
Right.
a lot of
Yeah.
times. So you have to be tough against the run, but you have to be durable and flexible enough and versatile enough to run down the middle with a tight end 30 or 40 yards, especially tight ends now that are basically power forwards in
Yeah.
the NBA.
Right.
That's a tough matchup. So I don't really know how you solve that problem. You just have to, I guess, you have to be fortunate enough to find guys who can do both.
Yeah. It is very demanding. My last question for you. You coached for a little bit too, right? High school, college,
Mhm.
briefly. What got you into coaching and how did that, what was your approach like as a coach versus one as a player? How different were those two things?
Well, I think as a player, you understand what you could do, and you know what you could do,
Hmm.
and you try to get better at those skills. So it seems like you have a little bit more control of what's going on. So let's say that me and you are driving, and I'm in the driver's seat. I understand what I'm doing.
Hmm.
So you may be in the passenger seat thinking like, "Oh man, he's really getting close," or is he gonna bump this curve? But for me, I have perspective.
Hmm.
Well, I know what I can do and what I can't do. So as a player, that's kind of how I looked at it. As a coach, it's basically about, can you articulate the knowledge that you have
Hmm.
and relay it to that player, and that player understands. So it's about, to me, it's about effective communication.
Right.
Can I communicate to these guys where they get it and they understand and they can execute it on the field? I think as a coach, especially you on the sideline, you don't really have a good perspective. So I will always ask my players, what do you see? Because
Mm.
I can't really see it as well. You
Yeah.
know, I see it from one perspective, but honestly, what do you see?
Hmm.
So I think it's a constant communication and constant teaching and understanding the individual that you're coaching.
Yeah.
There's some guys you can coach certain ways, other guys you have to coach in another fashion. So it's really about figuring out who that guy is and appealing to him and understanding what his goals are and how you can effectively help him get to where he wants to be.